Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Movie Talk with Freedom. So, this week we'll be talking about Black Panther Wakanda Forever is going to be the main discussion about that movie's box office tracking and performance, as well as Black Adam, in my judgment, about whether or not it's a hit or a flop. And then we also have One Piece Film Red, which opened this weekend. So, let's just jump right into it. So starting up the conversation, of course, is going to be Wakanda Forever. Sure, it doesn't open for another week, but I wanna let you guys know how it's tracking. What I think of, how I think the movie will do, and what I'll be talking about. So first up, on November 8th, 2022, that's when the review embargo lifts. That's when critics will be able to see it. Very important for this movie. If this movie has critic scores like below 80%, it's going to be a disaster, because that's what Black Widow got. That's what, that puts in the same tier as Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, same tier as Thor Love and Thunder, same tier as Thor The Dark World, same tier as Iron Man 3. It just would not be good. That would signal slightly bad word of mouth. The next day, November 9th, that's when it releases overseas, and that's when we'll be able to get the first clues of the audience reaction. And I will be talking about this, throughout the week. I just want you guys to know that. Day after that, Thursday previews. Big thing. Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness opened to $36 million. This is the biggest previews of the year so far. Thor Love and Thunder opened to $29 million, but that movie was so incredibly front-loaded. Top Gun Maverick was $20 million. Jurassic World Dominion, $18.5 million. The Batman was $21 million. So, if it's in that range of $20 to $40 million, I think it'll be looking good, but it should have Thursday previews somewhere with a 3 in front of it, maybe even a 4 if it's really healthy. 30 to 40 million is what I would say. As for its and November 11th, day after that, opening day, baby. That's when Thursday previews are always rolled into Friday, so that's when we'll get the first clues of how it'll actually open. I would say if it opens 70 million, then you're looking at an opening weekend of somewhere around 170. If it opens closer to 80 million, you're looking at an opening weekend closer to 190. If it opens at 90 million or above, you're looking at an opening weekend closer to about $200 million. So the industry is projecting that this movie will open somewhere between 175 to 210. The very bottom of that projection would make it the 15th highest opening of all time. The 7th biggest, I think, for a Marvel movie. And 210 would make it the 6th biggest opening of all time. But no matter which end this lands on, it would make a new record for the biggest opening weekend for a movie that was released in November. It would top Hunger Games Catching Fire, which opened to 158. That's a very low bar for Wakanda Forever to clear. I think it'll easily make 158. But look at all these Hunger Games, Twilight. Hey, another Marvel movie is in there, number 7, Thor Ragnarok, 122.7. But there's a lot of Twilight movies, a lot of Hunger Games movies in there, a couple Harry Potter movies, a lot of movies that are based off of books. Just something very interesting to me. We'll talk about this next week about, how much it beat the record by. And on top of that, for the all-time opening weekends, 175 would put it under the top 10. But it would be in line with other Marvel movies like Captain America Civil War, Iron Man 3, as well as other Disney movies like Star Wars Episode 9. 210, though, would put it at number 6, just under Star Wars Last Jedi, but just over Jurassic World, the first one. I do think there's a strong chance Wakanda Forever will open in the top 10, in the 190s maybe. I don't know about 200, but I also think there is a slight chance it comes slightly under the top 10, like in the 180s. And look, Black Panther is at number 8, the original one, $202 million, the 8th biggest opening weekend of all time. If this one can come close to that, like 190 or even 200, like just under the Black Panther, I think that would be considered a big win. Now, my expectation for this movie is a bit more bullish than the industry projection. My expectation is 180 to $220 million. Next topic of discussion, $1 billion club chances. There's only 50 movies that have crossed the $1 billion mark. One of them in 2021, 2 of them this year. And those 2 are Top Gun Maverick at just under $1.5 billion, just outside the top 10, as well as Jurassic World Dominion, which barely crossed $1 billion. How is the critical reaction? That will be a big thing that could determine whether or not this movie makes $1 billion. But you have to take into account that even if this movie has Rotten Tomatoes score in the 70s or low 80s, there are other Marvel movies that have had tomato scores in the 70s that have still gotten to $1 billion. Big example, Avengers Age of Ultron has like a 76%, and it got to $1.4 billion. Captain Marvel has like a 76%, I think, as well. It also got $1 billion, like $1.2 billion. But also you have Iron Man 3, which was like 75, and that got to $1 billion. So I do think if the critic scores are like 80 and above, or maybe just under 80, but if it is under 80, I do think that's embarrassing. But if it's just under 80 or anything over 80%, that'll significantly improve its chances of getting to $1 billion. Next up, how's the audience reaction? So Cinema Score. This is a company that will pull people as soon as they leave the movie theaters. You know, from a scale of like F to A. They don't pull everybody, they pull like a specific amount of people in like specific areas. So you might not get asked, but there are other people that will get asked. The first Black Panther got an A+. But I think if this movie gets anywhere in the A range, that's good. Because the last 2 Marvel movies, Doctor Strange and Thor: Love and Thunder, both got B+. However, Spider-Man No Way Home also got an A+. So we'll just have to wait and see on that one. Number 3, how front-loaded is the opening? Because it could open at like, globally at like 400 million, but drop like 65% in the second weekend and miss $1 billion. That's what happened with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which opened to 450 globally, but dropped 60, I think globally like 70% in the second weekend, and it missed $1 billion. Came like 45 million under. So that's going to be a big thing. As for the movies that actually came out this weekend, Black Adam remained number 1, $18.5 million in the third weekend. That's a 33% drop. But, I mean, domestically, it's still performing on par with Hobbs and Shaw. The global number is what worries me. It's only at 319, but basically 320. Now, though, it got banned in China. It's never going to get released there. So it looks like it might miss $400 million. That would be so bad. If it got to $400 million, that would be yay. But it had a budget of $200 million, an advertising budget of at least $100 million. So that's a $300 million budget. Studios only get about half of the box office. The other half goes to the theaters. It goes to the actors. You know, it gets distributed elsewhere. So it needs $600 million to break even, like just for Warner Brothers to make their money back. This movie could make $200 million under that. So I don't know. Second place, One Piece film Red, which actually opened about $3 million under the expectation of like $13 million from last week. But it did have a range of like 9 to 15, and it did come within that range, $9.5 million. It's been playing in Japan for a while. It's It's at almost 150 million there, so that brings its global total to about 160, a little under 160, but basically 160. So it's doing nice business, like really nice business. That's really all I have to say about that one. If that one had opened in like double digits, I think I would have talked about it a little more, but it didn't. Number 3, Ticket to Paradise. Whew, look at that hold, 14%. That is insane, even for a third weekend. But I think that speaks to a lack of competition because almost all of the movies in the top 10, as you will see, had impressively strong holds. So, but the domestic total, 46.7, that's nice. Worldwide total, almost 140. That's great. It had a budget of 60 million. So I would think it probably only needed another 20 to 30 million to break even, and I think could do that just here in the States if Black Panther doesn't cut it off. Coming in number 4 was Smile. This movie only dropped less than 30% in its 6th weekend. This is like the horror version of Avatar. Like these are like Avatar level holds. It obviously didn't open as much as Avatar or make as much, but this is almost like Get Out, which had amazing holds week to week back in 2017. In fact, this movie's second weekend drop was only like 2% worse than Get Out. So I think that's a perfect comparison. Get Out though made almost $200 million. This movie's not going to get that, at least not in the States. Globally, it's already at $200 million. That's pretty nice. And domestically, it is going to cross $100 million, which is huge, especially for a movie that only had a $17 million budget. Number 5, Pray for the Devil. This movie had a surprisingly good second weekend hold, especially for a movie that got a C+ cinema score. And it's a horror movie. Horror movies, apart from like the rare ones like Smile or Get Out, typically drop mid-60s, heck, maybe even mid-70s. Maybe even 80 if you're a Halloween Ends. But this movie dropped pretty nice, but it did open pretty low. Domestically, it's at 13.6. It did add like 1.5 million overseas. So its global total is about 15 million, but that total was so low I didn't really include it. As for the overall top 10, Lao Lao Crocodile interestingly actually went up 23% this weekend despite losing a few theaters. That's very interesting. The Banshees of Inisherin is the latest limited release to go wide. It's the latest awards contender, but it ain't winning no awards, especially with the low box office it has. Till only dropped 32%. That's another awards contender. That's pretty good. Halloween Ends had the biggest drop in the top 10, about 66%, but it's after Halloween, so not really that surprising. While Terrifier 2 continues to have very impressive box office staying power. It's about to cross $10 million, which for an indie horror film that almost nobody knew about, that's pretty damn impressive. But, I mean, other than that, pretty quiet at the box office. Really nothing to talk about. I mean, this coming weekend, Black Panther, the only new release, it's expected to open 175 to 290 as we talked about, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens. So that's it for this weekend's movie talk, and I'll see you guys next week.